With this video, Brian and I are going to talk about some of the unintended consequences you may suffer if you're not careful in the way you schedule and word your parent time and your custody sharing schedules. So before we talk about how you can avoid that and how you can be careful, let's talk about somebody who meant well but had it twisted and used against her.
So most people, when they're setting their parent time schedule, they'll say, okay, I'm going to take Monday through Tuesday, you're going to take Wednesday through Thursday, and every other weekend. It's
Or they might say something like, I'll take 1 week, you'll take another week.
Sure.
It's not so much that we're saying there's an exact way of doing it, but what they can do is they can look at a calendar and
plot it out and understand what's happening, and they can basically not have any kind of, it's not going to be turned against them, basically.
Because it's like, look, I always have Mondays and Tuesdays. You always have Wednesdays and Thursdays. We alternate weekends. We know that we've got an alternating holiday schedule. But sometimes that can't work. Give us an example of a situation like with this lady we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so the ex-wife was dealing with trying to set parent time with the ex-husband who had a shifting schedule at work, so they couldn't just nail down, okay, Monday through Tuesday, Wednesday through Thursday, or something.
Because there were days when he worked Mondays and Tuesdays. There were other days when he didn't work Mondays and Tuesdays. So they couldn't set it out on the calendar on just a repeating schedule year after year. He would say, my schedule changes month to month. Or you may have an ex who has a schedule that comes out every quarter, or something like that. Or somebody who says, well, it's always changing year to year, but I'll know what it is, but you won't know until next year, or something like that. If you're not careful, you may say, well, gee, I know you've got to work and I want to be accommodating, but these opportunistic ex-spouses can take advantage of you. How did her ex-husband take advantage of her?
So basically what was happening is he would say, all right, so I'm going to have my 12 days out of the month and my every other weekend. But
which is essentially 2 weekends out of each month, more or less.
But what he would do is say, well, because of my work schedule, whether this was true or not, he would say, I'm going to put my days on top of one of my holidays, so it'll kind of cut in. It ended up cutting into her weekend.
And then connect that with one of my weekends. So he'd take his weekdays, he'd take his holidays, and then he'd tack on one of his 2 weekends per month, so that mom didn't see the kids for, in some cases, 3 weeks at a time.
And we think it was intentional because he would basically be able to utilize the statute to say, my holiday overrules and trumps your weekend. Sorry about that.
And he would do that. And it was clear that when they were talking, he never described a situation where the kids would be with him for 3 weeks in a row with no contact with mom. He made it sound like, oh yeah, it's balanced, it's equal, it's even, and things like that. But when you look at the decree and the way it's written, and this parent time plan and custody sharing schedule, everything he said was something that he could do. He wasn't breaking any rules. He wasn't breaking any laws. He just didn't bother to tell his ex that he was going to exploit the system. So what can you do to avoid that? Well, number one, actually, we should do this first. So once the mom realized what was happening, why can't she just go back into court and say, hey, look, unintended consequences, didn't see this coming, this isn't working out well for me or the kids, and it's not fair, so Your Honor, would you please set this up so that we won't have this problem arise anymore? Is that something you can do?
Well, the problem with that is there's no guarantee that the court's going to look at that and go, oh, well, okay, just a misunderstanding, let's revamp it. No, they're probably going to say, you agreed to this in advance.
You helped formulate the plan.
Foresee it, They're not going to really understand that it was actually not a matter of you being completely ignorant and not paying attention. It may have been sold to you a completely different way, and you were innocent, you didn't know.
And Brian makes a good point here. So the court is probably going to tell you, you helped formulate this plan. If you had a lawyer, they'll make sure to point that out. You had a lawyer, and then they'll also say, and look, it was foreseeable that this could happen, because it did happen. So therefore, you must have known that it could. But let's be honest, unless you've been divorced before and gone through a messy divorce with a nasty parent time schedule or something like that, you're not going to be preparing for the worst in all cases. In fact, the last thing you want to do is dwell on that and think about it. But the court might say, look, this is what you did, and this was foreseeable. So because it was foreseeable, I'm not going to change something just because you claim you don't like it now. So what can you do to make sure that your schedule is going to be fair? Could it be as simple as writing down, we want to make sure this schedule is fair?
Sure.
That's a good place to start, actually.
Outlining that you don't want the parent time schedule in and of itself isn't going to control the unforeseeable things that could come up, like a death in the family or a once in a lifetime event that had to get changed, and so now it's on your weekend where it should have been her weekend, and you were going to both coordinate it somehow. You've got to.
We've even seen situations where somebody will say, we know that under some circumstances, Utah code schedules can result in the children spending 3 weeks in a row with one parent. And we're going to make sure that even though our schedule is already set up on an annual basis, if ever we get into this 3 week in a row situation, there's a safety valve that will make sure that the other parent gets at least one overnight or a couple of days or a few hours or something like that to break it up. So that way your schedule will still work 9 times out of 10,
Right.
but in those odd situations where it's not working the way it was intended, when it's having negative consequences, you've got something to make sure those negative consequences are somewhat neutralized. Just make sure that when you're looking through the proposed parent time and custody sharing schedule, that you can read it, actually like try to channel your inner evil person and say, what ways can this be exploited for me or for my ex? And again, we'll never advise you to do something that would take advantage of somebody or would mistreat somebody. There's just more important things in life than being able to get away with something legally. But it would be wise for you to say, although I don't want this to happen, the best way for me to ensure this doesn't happen is try to think of some of the worst things that could happen so that I eliminate that in the language. Make it so that it's too clear to be misconstrued. Make sure that, as we talked about before, there are some safety releases and some
Right.
things like that so that your schedule benefits you and the children and both parents so that there aren't any of these adverse unintended consequences.
Right.
Thanks.